Millions of people have stood in front of Tutankhamun's gold mask over the last 100 years. Scholars have measured it, photographed it, X-rayed it, restored it, and studied it more closely than almost any object in the ancient world. And in 2014, a team running equipment built for jewelers and forensic labs, not archaeologists, pointed their instruments at that same gold and found something sitting on the surface of the king's face that nobody had ever documented. Not buried, not hidden inside the tomb somewhere. Sitting directly on the mask itself, in plain sight, for 90 years of public display, completely invisible to the naked eye. That single discovery reopened a question serious Egyptologists are still fighting over right now: whether the most famous face in ancient history was actually built for Tutankhamun at all. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what that hidden layer is, why a British Egyptologist thinks part of this mask may have originally belonged to someone else entirely, and why Egypt's own antiquities establishment has pushed back hard against that idea. Subscribe before we go in, because this argument is still actively unresolved between real named experts. Right now. Start with the discovery everyone already knows. Howard Carter found the entrance to Tutankhamun's tomb in the Valley of the Kings on November 4, 1922, funded by the wealthy collector Lord Carnarvon. It took 3 more years of careful excavation before Carter's team finally reached the mummy itself, and on October 28, 1925, they lifted the lid off the innermost of 3 nested coffins and saw the gold mask for the first time in roughly 3,250 years. Carter described the face as calm and beautiful. The mask stands about 54 centimeters tall, weighs more than 10 kilograms, made almost entirely of gold, with eyes shaped from obsidian and quartz, eyebrows and eyelids inlaid with lapis lazuli, and a wide collar set with carnelian and turquoise-colored glass. For most of the century since, it was treated as a settled, fully understood chapter of history, admired, catalogued, rarely questioned. That confidence started cracking the moment scientists finally aimed real analytical equipment at the gold itself, and here's what makes this genuinely interesting. Nobody involved was even looking for a controversy. In 2014, a team of Japanese researchers Oda, Ishizaki, and Baba received rare permission to study the mask using a portable device that reads the chemical makeup of metal without cutting into it or removing a single flake, combining 2 techniques: X-ray fluorescence and X-ray diffraction, both firing a focused beam at a spot roughly 2 millimeters wide and reading exactly what bounces back. The whole process happened in open air, without damaging the mask at all. Their actual goal was almost administrative: catalog the materials, confirm which stones and glass were used, measure how pure the gold really was. The study was published that same year in an academic reference volume honoring Egyptologist Sakuji Yoshimura, intended as a technical resource for future researchers. Not a headline. But the numbers coming back from the face specifically told a different story than the rest of the mask. The scan confirmed the gold sheets making up most of the mask measured 23 carats, very high purity, entirely consistent with Royal Egyptian metalwork. But the surface of the face itself carried something extra. Sitting on top of that 23-carat gold was a separate coating. A layer of 18-carat white gold, only about 28 nanometers thick, thinner than most soap bubbles, and completely invisible without instruments capable of reading structures at that microscopic scale. That layer had been sitting on Tutankhamun's face for roughly 3,300 years, without a single person noticing it. Hidden inside gold that looks completely solid and uniform to the naked eye. White gold gets its pale tone from mixed-in metals like silver, giving the face a subtly different color from the deeper yellow of the surrounding headdress and collar. Ancient Egyptian goldsmiths clearly had the skill to apply a coating this thin and precise a level of craftsmanship modern conservators simply hadn't recognized until the scan exposed it. That single finding raised an obvious question. Why would the face specifically receive different treatment from the rest of the mask? And that question connected directly to something a British Egyptologist had already been arguing for over a decade. Nicholas Reeves had been examining a very specific detail on the mask since 2001, and his theory gained wide attention in 2015. The ears. Both ears on the mask are pierced clean through, clearly designed to hold earrings, and in royal Egyptian art from this era, pierced ears appear almost exclusively on children and on women, never on a grown king shown in his official, formal funerary image. Reeves pointed out that no known depiction of an adult male pharaoh anywhere in Egyptian art shows him wearing earrings, making the detail genuinely difficult to explain if this mask was designed, from the start, specifically for Tutankhamun as a ruling adult king. Reeves connected the pierced ears instead to Nefertiti, a female pharaoh who briefly held power during the chaotic years after Akhenaten's death, and before the child Tutankhamun took the throne. Many historians believe Nefertiti and Queen Nefertiti, Tutankhamun's stepmother, were the same person, ruling under a different official name. If that's correct, Reeves argued, the mask, or at least significant parts of it, may have originally been built for her, not for Tutankhamun at all. Zahi Hawass, Egypt's former antiquities minister, pushed back hard on this reading immediately, pointing out that pierced ears appear across statues and images of 18th dynasty royalty, from childhood generally, regardless of eventual gender or role, and arguing the detail alone proves nothing about who the mask was originally built for. That disagreement over a small pair of holes was really just the opening argument, though because the real fight centers on something carved directly into the gold itself. To understand why that argument even matters, you need the historical backdrop it's built on. Nefertiti was chief wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten, who ruled Egypt for roughly 17 years beginning around 1353 BCE, and who pushed through one of the most disruptive religious upheavals in Egyptian history, shutting down worship of the traditional gods and elevating a single sun disk, the Aten, above them entirely. Nefertiti held a strikingly public role throughout this period, appearing in temple carvings performing rituals almost always reserved exclusively for the pharaoh, standing beside her husband as something closer to a genuine co-ruler than a traditional queen. Then, around her 12th year in the official record, she simply vanishes from Egyptian inscriptions entirely. Historians still genuinely dispute what happened next. Some believe she died. Others believe she took on a new identity as a female pharaoh under the throne name Nefertiti, ruling either alongside Akhenaten or briefly after him, before the child Tutankhamun took power around age 9. A third theory points to a separate, still mysterious ruler named Smenkhkare filling that same gap instead. Whichever version is correct, Akhenaten's religious revolution collapsed almost immediately after his death. The royal court abandoned his new capital, returned to the traditional center of power at Thebes, and restored the old gods. Tutankhamun himself was actually born with the name Tutankhaten, honoring his father's sun disk, and later changed it specifically to honor Amun, the god his family worked to reinstate. Because so few clean, undisputed records survive from these specific years, historians genuinely have far less solid material to work with here than for almost any other stretch of Egyptian royal history, which is exactly why researchers turn to the mask's own inscriptions with such intensity, hoping the metal itself might preserve something the written record didn't. Reeves studied the cartouche, the oval frame enclosing a royal name stamped into the straps running down the mask's shoulders, and described the surface around Tutankhamun's name as noticeably worn and reworked compared to the crisp, clean engraving found elsewhere on the mask. Looking closer at faint scratches beneath that surface, Reeves reported the outline aligned with a different name entirely, Ankhepurure Nefertiti, the same throne name tied to the female pharaoh, who may have been Nefertiti. Reeves laid this argument out fully in a paper titled Tutankhamun's Mask Reconsidered, building on years of separate research showing that numerous objects throughout the tomb appear to have been recycled from an earlier owner. His broader theory: when Tutankhamun died suddenly and unexpectedly around age 18 or 19, his officials had no properly completed tomb or funerary equipment ready for him, and under that pressure, workers repurposed available royal items including, in this theory, a mask originally built years earlier for someone else adjusting the name and face to fit their new king. That kind of theory only holds up if the physical evidence actually backs it. and researchers found more of exactly that sitting in the metal itself. Separate compositional testing found the gold used specifically for the face measures roughly 23.2 carats, while gold across the rest of the headdress and collar measures closer to 23.5 carats, a small but consistent difference. One, Reeves argues, indicates the face was manufactured as its own separate piece of metal, added onto an existing headdress, rather than cast together with it as one continuous piece. That claim lines up directly with what the 2014 scan had already shown. A face carrying its own slightly different gold alloy, then coated in a wafer-thin layer of pale white gold nobody had detected in 90 years of public display, a combination that, to Reeves, points toward a face that was swapped in rather than original to the piece. Under his theory, the Nemes headdress, the collar, and the ears were built first for Nefertiti, and the face seen today was added afterward, replacing whatever face had originally been there. None of this proves the theory beyond argument, but it gave both skeptics and supporters real physical details worth testing further. That closer testing arrived sooner than anyone expected, forced by an accident nobody saw coming. In August 2014, workers at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo accidentally knocked the mask's long braided beard loose while repairing lighting around its display case. Instead of reporting the damage through proper channels, staff quietly reattached it using industrial epoxy glue, leaving a thick, visible crust at the seam. The botched repair stayed hidden from the public until January 2015, when the damage was finally revealed and confirmed by Egypt's Antiquities Ministry. Officials brought in German conservator Christian Ekman, a specialist in ancient glass and metal restoration, and starting in October 2015. Ekman led a joint German-Egyptian team through a 9-week process that removed the beard, carefully scraped away the epoxy, and reattached it using beeswax, a material far closer to what ancient Egyptian goldsmiths would actually have used. As part of that work, the team performed a full 3-dimensional scan of the mask, the most detailed manufacturing study it had ever received, which also revealed the beard had actually come loose once before, sometime after the tomb's original discovery, and hadn't been properly reattached until 1946. 8 museum employees, including a former director, were later fined and disciplined over the mishandled repair, and embarrassing scandal for Egypt's antiquities sector internationally, but one that also produced the single most thorough physical examination the mask had received since it left the tomb. Even with all of that new data available, not every expert agreed it pointed toward Nefertiti. Hawass has stated flatly that pierced ears mean nothing on their own, since they appear throughout images of young 18th dynasty royalty regardless of gender. Saba Abdel Razek, a former director at the Egyptian Museum, pointed to the protective spell engraved across the mask's back and shoulders, arguing its wording repeatedly ties back specifically to names and titles used for Tutankhamun, which he argues undercuts any claim the piece belonged to someone else. Hawass also noted that during the 2015 restoration, the German-led team specifically checked for any trace of Nefertiti's name anywhere on the mask, and found none. Reeves's broader related theory that Nefertiti's undiscovered burial sits behind a hidden wall inside Tutankhamun's own tomb ran into similarly strong resistance. Radar scans conducted by a Japanese specialist in 2016 suggested hollow spaces behind the tomb's north wall. But a follow-up investigation by an Italian team from the Polytechnic University of Turin found no supporting evidence, and a detailed 2021 academic review of every radar survey and argument on the subject concluded the overall evidence stood strongly against a hidden Nefertiti burial, while still acknowledging that some objects in the tomb clearly had been reused from an earlier owner. Strip away every competing theory, and one fact remains completely unshaken by any side of this argument: a team running equipment built for chemical analysis, not archaeology, found a coating of 18-karat white gold, only 28 nanometers thick, sitting on Tutankhamun's face, hidden inside metal that millions of people had already looked directly at for generations. That measurement isn't up for debate the way the Nefertiti theory is. It happened, and nobody documented it until modern scanning technology finally caught it. Whether that hidden layer, The pierced ears and the worn cartouche together add up to a stolen identity from a forgotten queen, or simply reflect the rushed, resourceful improvisation of ancient goldsmiths working under real-time pressure. Remains one of the most actively contested arguments in Egyptology today. The mask now stands inside the Grand Egyptian Museum in Giza, a site spanning roughly 500,000 square meters that finally reunites more than 5,000 objects from Tutankhamun's tomb in one place, something Howard Carter's own team could never have imagined as they stood inside that sealed tomb back in 1922. Scientists are still working to fully understand a face the entire world already thought it knew. If a face this famous can still be hiding a secret this small, this precise, and this old, there's no telling what else in that tomb is still waiting for the right instrument to finally notice it.